If you're watching this, you've probably dealt with an entitled neighbor or a nightmare HOA at some point, but I'd wager my story takes the cake and eats it too right in front of your illegally parked car. My particular HOA menace, let's call her Calamity Kate, decided my private ranch land was her personal shortcut and express lane, saving her a whole 3 minutes on her commute. She was about to learn that trespassing on my property meant navigating a field of carefully planned, entirely legal landmines designed specifically for her. My ranch, Whispering Pines, wasn't just land, it was a sanctuary, a legacy passed down through generations, acres of rolling hills, ancient oaks and pasture where my cattle grazed peacefully. It was my lifeblood, the place I worked from sunup to sundown, and the place I found solace. Then came the new executive housing development springing up like a patch of fungal growth on my western border, a place run by an HOA with an iron fist and a complete disregard for existing property lines or rural common sense. With it came Calamity Kate. My first encounter seemed harmless, or so I thought. I was mending a fence line near the development a good quarter-mile inside my boundary when a shiny, oversized SUV the color of aggression, some angry shade of crimson, bounced off the paved cul-de-sac and onto my access track. This track was for ranch work, moving equipment, checking livestock, not joyrides from suburbia. The woman behind the wheel looked like she demanded to speak to the manager of the Sunrise. She rolled her window down with the kind of smug hum only luxury cars have and asked if the track was a through route, not politely, more like she was conducting an interrogation. I told her, no ma'am, this is private land, my ranch, the main road is back the way you came. She gave me a look that could curdle milk, then without a word drove right past me down my track like I hadn't said anything, like my words were. Background noise. I stood there, wrench in hand, dust swirling, thinking that was outrageously rude, but surely a one-time thing. I was wrong. That was only the scouting mission for a full-blown invasion. The track exits onto another county road across my property, and if you're ignoring boundaries, it might save a few minutes getting to town. For Kate, that was enough. She began using my land like it was part of her HOA domain, morning, noon, even evenings. Sometimes it wasn't a shortcut anymore, it was her daily route. What made it worse was the way she did it, like she owned the place, like the deepening tire tracks from her oversized SUV somehow gave her claim. I tried the civil approach first. I put up a big clear no trespassing sign with another smaller one below saying agricultural access only. Thought that'd do the trick. That sign lasted 2 days. By day 3 it was gone, not knocked over, not broken, just vanished. I found it tossed in a ditch half a mile away, clearly run over several times. Judging by the tire marks, someone had made a point. My next move was to intercept her. I parked my farm truck by the entrance time to her commute and flagged her down. I kept my tone calm. Ma'am, we need to talk. You can't keep doing this. This is active ranchland. You're putting yourself and my animals at risk and tearing up my pasture. Kate didn't even roll her window all the way down through the tint. I saw perfect hair and a face that looked disappointed in everything. I've been using this road for weeks, she said, like that gave her some right. It's an old track, clearly an established right of way. I could feel the heat rising. It's a ranch track I use for tractors, not a public road. It's been here because my family's worked this land for 70 years. Your weeks of trespassing don't change that. Then she dropped the kicker. The HOA president, Mr. Henderson, said it looked like an access road we could probably use. It's more convenient for several of us. Now she wasn't just acting entitled, she was hiding behind the HOA like a shield. Mr. Henderson doesn't own this land, I said, trying not to shout. I do, and neither he nor the HOA can give you or anyone else permission to use it. The next time I see you or anyone from that development on my track, I'll be calling the sheriff. She scoffed. Don't threaten me, this is a community matter. You're being very unneighborly, hoarding all this land. Then she gunned the engine, spun her tires and stormed off, leaving a trail of exhaust and arrogance. Unneighborly, hoarding land. I was running a ranch that probably boosted their property values, and she was accusing me of being the problem for wanting it respected. I called the HOA president, a man named Henderson. I'd never met. His tone was dismissive from the jump. Mrs. Davis, he said, sounding bored. Yes, Karen mentioned something about a track. We're all new here. Maybe there's some misunderstanding about access. I explained clearly that there was no misunderstanding. It's private land, well marked, and her residents are trespassing. He said he'd look into it, but he clearly saw me as the inconvenience, not his rule-breaking neighbor. So next time I saw Kate's SUV, and it didn't take long, I called the sheriff. A deputy came out, took my statement, checked my markers, then went to speak with her. I watched from a distance, 10 minutes, maybe, lots of gesturing, then he left. She waited until he was out of sight, then drove right across my land again, this time with a smugness you could feel from 200 yards. The deputy called later said she claimed there was an implied easement and that she'd seen county vehicles use the track of flat lie. County vehicles use the actual road like everyone else. She also claimed I threatened her. I told him the facts: no easement, no access, no threat, but I could tell it was becoming a toss-up for them. Trespass cases without clear danger or major damage rarely rise up the priority list, and Kate was careful enough not to start tearing things up yet. Still, the tire ruts were deepening, especially after a rain. The path was turning into a scar through what used to be a green, peaceful stretch. I knew then civil words and polite signage weren't going to cut it. Kate felt untouchable, backed by her arrogance and the HOA's passive support. She was becoming a neighborhood dictator, and my ranch was her first target. The frustration festered, a constant bitter taste. My quiet life was being shredded, one illegal shortcut at a time. This wasn't just about a strip of grass, it was about principle, about defending my land, my home, my work. Because if I let this go, what came next? Would my pond become their community pool? Would they treat my barn like extra parking for garden parties? That thought sparked something in me. If Kate wanted to act like this was a battlefield, then maybe I needed to start thinking like a strategist. The idea of landmines started as a joke, but the more I fumed, the more I wondered what kind of legal, non-lethal deterrence I could deploy. She'd declared war on my peace, she just didn't know I was ready to fight back. And that decision didn't come from rage, it came from resolve. But rather as a slow burn of indignation reached its flashpoint. Calamity. Kate and her arrogant assumptions about my land had dragged me from patience to frustration, and now into a phase of cold, focused planning. If the law as delivered by a tired deputy wasn't going to help, then I'd use every inch of my property rights to make her little shortcut so irritating, so difficult, so costly that she'd finally grasp what private land really meant. This had moved beyond Kate, it was about drawing a line in the dirt. The HOA president Henderson had proven useless. His vague promises to look into it were nothing more than, I don't care unless it's my yard. I needed real tools, not weapons, but strategy and facts. My first step was a visit to my neighbor Jedediah, a retired surveyor and local fixture who knew every legal and topographic wrinkle in the county. Jed had lived on his acreage longer than most people had been alive and had dealt with more boundary disputes than any judge. Over coffee in his cluttered, map-crammed office, I told him everything. He listened quietly, his lined face tightening at Kate's behavior and Henderson's shrug. When I finished, he drained his mug and said, sounds like textbook new money entitlement wrapped in HOA nonsense. They move into these prefab palaces, get a rulebook, and suddenly think they own the world. Jed confirmed what I already knew. My property lines were indisputable, there was no easement, and Kate was full of bluster. First thing we do, he said, hauling out an oversized plat map, let's remark every boundary, clean new stakes, bright paint, no excuses. That weekend we walked the edge where the HOA butted up to my land. Jed used his old but spot-on transit and rod to verify every pin. We replaced faded markers with bright orange steel stakes hammered deep. We put up new large signs clearly stating private property bolted directly into the steel. I figured Kate might think twice about stealing a sign she couldn't pull off without tools and time. During that walk, Jed made a quiet comment. Her SUV's got low-profile tires, right, not meant for anything more rugged than a parking lot. That stuck. What if her shortcut became a bumpy ordeal? What if her gleaming gas guzzler had to face some honest country terrain? Of course legality came first. Jed reminded me, whatever you do, make sure it serves a real land purpose and mark any hazards clearly. Next I met with Ms. Albright, a sharp-eyed lawyer who specialized in rural property. I laid out the facts, asked what I could do without crossing lines. She was quietly entertained. I've seen her type, she said. These HOA warriors always think their rules outrank the Constitution. She assured me I could modify my land however I needed for ranch use. I could till grade, add ditches, rocks, barriers, as long as it had a legitimate agricultural or property management purpose. As long as I wasn't setting traps and I posted warnings clearly, then I was well within my rights. Signage is your shield, she said. If she ignores those and damages her own car, the fault's likely hers. She told me to document everything. Photos, video logs, warning letters if needed. Build a paper trail that could stop a train. Armed with a refreshed survey, new legal clarity, and Jed's boots-on-the-ground experience, I got to work. Not with explosives, of course, but with a series of entirely legal deterrents. I didn't want to just slow her down, I wanted the track to feel like enemy territory to any SUV not built for ranch life. All while still staying smooth enough for my own tractors. I studied the path Kate used, watching how it had already begun to degrade into two deep ruts with a raised, stubborn center. My plan was simple: take what nature had started and finish it, strategically, aggressively, and legally. My old disc harrow, normally reserved for field prep, was about to find a new calling. Just imagining Kate's gleaming crimson SUV scraping and jerking over the terrain brought the first real smile to my face in weeks. But this wasn't just about dirt and steel. The research phase had done more than arm me with knowledge, it had fortified my resolve. There's a particular satisfaction in striking back with precision, within the boundaries of law and land stewardship, against someone who thinks they're untouchable. Kate had taken my courtesy for cowardice. She was about to learn what decades of grit, roots, and stubborn pride could look like when cornered. She wanted a shortcut. I was going to give her a master class in the scenic route, one she wouldn't forget anytime soon. As I'd started calling it in my head, rolled out with the care and calculation of a military campaign, though my weapons were old farm tools and horticultural vengeance, not artillery. The beauty was that every single action I took was a legitimate land improvement. Just so happened those improvements would make Kate's little joyrides hellish. First came the signage. Not just one or two generic warnings, I went full theater, and my personal favorite, professional-grade metal signs. Highly visible. Posted right at the entry point she always used and again 20 feet in. You'd have to be blind, or willfully arrogant, not to see them. With Kate I had no doubt it could be both. Then came the groundwork, literally. Jed had pointed out Kate's SUV wasn't built for terrain. Low-profile tires, minimal clearance, all show, no substance. Perfect. I hitched up my heavy-duty disc harrow to my largest tractor and took it on a very deliberate pass down her shortcut. The discs were dropped deep, deeper than usual. The result wasn't just a tilled stretch of land. It was a row of sharp ridges and trenches, like corrugated metal carved into soil. What had once been two smooth ruts became an undulating nightmare. For my tractor? A minor nuisance. For Kate's crossover? A suspension-destroying, paint-scraping gauntlet. Next I took it a step further, literally. I collected a load of jagged rocks, fist to melon-sized, ones I'd cleared from other fields over the years. I placed them with precision, especially along the tire tracks and the raised center line. Not dramatic enough to scream booby trap, but just sharp enough to puncture a sidewall or wreck a fancy rim if hit wrong. I half-buried a few, pointing their nastiest edges upward like a row of hidden teeth. Perfectly natural for a rustic ranch road, of course. Rocks surface all the time out here. I was just encouraging their appearance in one very specific place. Then came the water element. There was already a shallow depression along the track. With some careful spade work, I deepened it ever so slightly and diverted the overflow from a nearby stock tank to trickle right into it. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that screamed sabotage. But after a rain, or even just a heavy runoff, it would turn into a beautiful, sticky, wheel-trapping mud bog. Dry, it looked harmless. Wet, it was a pit of regret. But I wasn't done. Every ranch has a muck heap, a pile of manure, hay, bedding, and thyme. I selected one of my more aromatic piles, well-aged and rich in personality. With my front-end loader, I relocated it, spreading a nice thick smear of the stuff across a 50-foot stretch just past the bog. Driving through it would be a filthy, gag-inducing ordeal. Getting stuck before reaching it? Even worse, you'd have to walk through it to get out. The mental image of Kate stepping out of her luxury SUV into knee-deep stink was almost art. Finally, I added what I called the horticultural defense system. I researched fast-growing, viciously thorned shrubs, honey locusts, wild roses, anything aggressive. I planted a dense row of hardy saplings right along the shoulders of the track where she might try to edge around the worst of the obstacles. They wouldn't stop a car today, but in time they'd become a living wall of thorns. Even now, their spindly, barbed arms whispered, "You don't belong here." Altogether, the road now looked less like a shortcut and more like a forgotten trail in the Badlands. And best of all, everything I'd done could be chalked up to land maintenance. Just a rancher tending to his property. Throughout the whole process, one thought kept me going. Kate may have started this, but I was going to finish it. I took meticulous photos and videos, each stage of the transformation carefully recorded. There I was with the tractor, the freshly installed warning signs, close-ups of the rugged new road texture, the strategically arranged rocks, the subtle water redirection for the mud bog, and, of course, the artfully smeared muck heap. Every detail was documented, time-stamped, and neatly stored. Ms. Albright would have been proud. It took nearly a full week to complete, squeezing the work between my regular ranch chores. It was grueling labor but deeply satisfying. Every drop of sweat felt like another small victory. I wasn't just reclaiming my land, I was defending it. Proactively, thoughtfully, and entirely within my rights. The beauty of it all was how innocuous it appeared to anyone without the full story. To an outsider, it might just look like a bumpy, under-maintained ranch track getting some overdue attention. But to Calamity Kate, it would be a gauntlet. An insult. A very personal rebuttal to her entitlement. I made sure my own tractor and ATV could still handle the path, albeit with a bit more caution. That was crucial. It was still my road. It just wasn't her shortcut anymore. When the final improvement was in place, I stood back to admire the result. The setting sun cast long shadows across the jagged, muck-streaked, deeply furrowed strip of land. It looked gloriously impassable for a luxury SUV. I felt a rush of anticipation, part satisfaction, part adrenaline. The trap was set. Now I just had to wait for the inevitable. And I knew it would come. Kate's ego was nothing if not consistent. The waiting brought its own strange thrill. I kept a pair of binoculars close at hand and found plenty of reasons to check the western boundary of my property more often than was truly necessary. I played the moment over and over in my mind, Kate's crimson SUV barreling down the lane, then the crunch, the spin, the squeal. I even set up a discreet trail cam hidden in the branches of an old oak tree, perfectly angled to catch her grand entrance, both for posterity and Ms. Albright's growing evidence file. A few days passed. I saw other HOA residents coming and going, but no sign of Kate. For a brief moment I wondered if maybe, just maybe, she'd taken the hint. Or perhaps Mr. Henderson had finally done something useful and warned her off. But then I remembered who I was dealing with. Kate wasn't the type to back down just because of a few signs or a rougher-looking road. No, she needed to feel the consequences. Personally. Viscerally. It was Thursday morning just after 8:30, prime Kate commute time. I was in the workshop, supposedly sharpening mower blades, but every muscle in my body was tuned to listen. Then I heard it. That familiar, smug growl of her engine. Faint at first, then growing louder. My heart kicked up a gear. I grabbed the binoculars and hustled to the small rise overlooking the path. There it was, her fire engine red SUV nosing out from the end of the cul-de-sac. She paused for a moment, maybe to read the signs, maybe to consider her choices. For a heartbeat I thought she might actually turn around. But no. With the arrogant stomp of her right foot, the SUV lurched forward and turned sharply onto my land. Game on. Even from a distance, I saw the vehicle start to buck and jolt the moment it hit the first set of deep furrows. The speed dropped. The smooth glide she was used to was gone, replaced by a lurching, bone-jarring ride. I allowed myself a small, grim smile. Phase 1, successful. She tried to maneuver through the corrugated mess, weaving awkwardly, the suspension creaking in protest. Then came the rocks. I saw her attempt to swerve around one particularly nasty cluster I'd lovingly positioned, but not quite fast enough. There was a sharp screech, audible even from my perch. The SUV lurched sideways. I pumped my fist. "Gotcha," I murmured. Slower now, clearly rattled, she crept forward toward the bog. From where I stood it looked like just a wet patch. But I knew better. She approached it cautiously, then, perhaps deciding a burst of speed would do the trick, she hit the gas. Wrong move. The front wheels plunged into the muck. The rear wheels spun helplessly, flinging arcs of sticky clay into the air, painting the sides of her pristine SUV with thick brown humiliation. She was well and truly stuck. Axle deep. One tire clearly damaged from the rock field. The entire vehicle sat at a sad, tilted angle, a monument to her hubris. Then the driver's door opened. Even from a distance I could feel the fury radiating from her as Kate stormed out, hands on hips, pacing in the mud. She screamed, At her car, at the sky, at fate itself. She tried to rock the SUV loose. No luck. The tires just spun and dug in deeper. And then she saw it, the muck heap. Her escape route now led directly through a freshly spread, steaming field of decomposing ranch waste. A slow, dawning horror crossed her face. I stayed put. This was her mess. Let her stew in it. After several minutes of pacing and what looked like angry phone calls, likely to her husband, then a tow company, then probably Henderson, she finally gave up on the idea of escaping through the far end of my property. Her gaze turned back toward the cul-de-sac, toward the trail of destruction behind her. And then the final indignity, the long, humiliating walk of shame. She picked her way through the rocks and furrows, one angry step at a time. That was my cue. I climbed into my old truck and slowly rolled along the field's edge, avoiding the track itself, until I was about 50 yards from her marooned vehicle. I stepped out casually. "Having a spot of bother there, Mrs. Davis?" I called, my voice honeyed with mock concern. She whirled around, face flushed with fury. You did this," she shrieked, pointing one shaking finger at me, the other at her ruined SUV. "This road was fine yesterday. You sabotaged it." I raised my eyebrows in mild surprise. "Sabotaged? Ma'am, this is my private agricultural access track. I've been doing some land work, improving drainage, breaking up soil compaction from unauthorized vehicle use. As you can see from the multiple warning signs, this area is clearly marked as hazardous and not a through road." She sputtered. "Warnings? You set a trap." "A trap," I echoed innocently. "Mrs. Davis, those rocks have been part of this land for eons. I'm simply working with the natural terrain." She glared at me speechless. Covered in mud, one shoe missing, her once gleaming SUV stranded and steaming behind her, Kate had never looked less in control. And I had never felt more vindicated. The ground, I explained, had been tilled in preparation for a cover crop. That wet spot? Just natural drainage, especially after I'd cleared the old culvert. And the smell? I gestured toward the muck. That's prime organic fertilizer, part of our regenerative agriculture program. If you'd stuck to the paved county roads, I added, you wouldn't be in this predicament. I tilted my head. Flat tire on one of those rocks I warned about? She went purple. "I'm calling the sheriff. I'm calling my lawyer. You'll pay for this." Sure enough, Deputy Miller showed up, same one who'd warned her before, along with a tow truck. The driver stepped out, took one long look at the scene and shook his head. "This is gonna be rough," he muttered. "Gonna cost you." Kate launched into a tirade about traps, sabotage, and me turning the road into some kind of medieval obstacle course. Deputy Miller listened, his expression neutral, then walked over to me. I handed him everything, printed photos from the trail cam showing Kate blowing past my posted warnings, dated pictures of the improvements, and a detailed breakdown of the agricultural work I'd undertaken. "Deputy," I said evenly, "this is my land." She was warned, verbally, in writing, and by the signage she chose to ignore. This is a working ranch track, not a public shortcut. He looked at the signs, the churned-up road, the sulking SUV, then back at me. He sighed. "Ma'am," he said to Kate, "this appears to be clearly marked private property. Mr. Jameson's well within his rights. Driving an SUV over terrain like this, especially after being warned, comes with consequences." Kate looked like she might actually combust. The tow truck crew eventually managed, after a symphony of grinding winches, boards, and profanity, to drag her crimson monument to entitlement back over the ruts and rocks. The undercarriage took another beating. By the time it was up on the flatbed, the vehicle was caked in mud, dented and scratched, a battered, humiliated shell of suburban confidence. She glared at me, venom dripping. "This isn't over." I smiled sweetly. "Oh, I rather think it is, Mrs. Davis. At least your shortcut is." Watching her drive of shame get hauled away was deeply, almost spiritually satisfying. But the real beauty came in the aftermath. Word spread fast. Faster than wildfire in a dry pasture. Within days, the tale of Kate's shortcut was HOA legend. Details got exaggerated, of course, but always in one direction. Kate, the arrogant fool who got exactly what she deserved. That trail cam footage? It found its way into the hands of a few reasonable HOA members who had previously expressed quiet sympathy. Suddenly, Kate wasn't just wrong, she was mocked. True to her promise, she tried to make it not over. She marched straight to Mr. Henderson, the HOA president, demanding action. Claimed I'd built booby traps. Accused me of acting like a feudal lord denying community access. But Henderson? He was suddenly singing a different tune. Maybe it was my lawyer's letter. A polite but firm packet from Miss Albright, complete with photographs, timelines, and a gentle suggestion that encouraging trespass could become very expensive for the HOA. Especially if I filed a countersuit. That seemed to spook him. He drove out himself, saw the professional-looking signs, the clearly agricultural terrain, and likely pictured legal fees stacking like hay bales in July. Shortly after, the HOA issued a memo. The ranch access track is private property. Do not use it. Trespassers are solely responsible for any damage incurred. No names were mentioned. None needed. She tried one more Hail Mary, small claims court. Accused me of willful destruction of property and creating a dangerous nuisance. Miss Albright laughed out loud when she told me. We'll be there. With a mountain of evidence. Court was brief. Comical even. Kate, stiff in a blazer, presented a stack of grainy photos of her ruined SUV. I countered with dated photos, letters, the trail cam footage, and a thick binder of documentation. The judge, a stern woman with zero time for nonsense, flipped through the evidence, then fixed Kate with a look. Ma'am, she said. You ignored multiple, no trespassing signs. Drove a commuter SUV onto private agricultural land. What exactly did you expect to happen? Kate stammered something about community spirit and implied easement. Dismissed. With prejudice. The judge even added a note about frivolous lawsuits and suggested Kate invest in a map next time she wanted to take a shortcut. That was the end. Oh, she still lives in the HOA, but her SUV never touched my land again. No other resident tried it either. My improvements slowly blended into the land. The thorns thickened, the muck composted down, the rocks settled into the soil. Peace returned to Whispering Pines. My cattle grazed in quiet. I mended fences without looking over my shoulder. I learned something too. Sometimes polite requests aren't enough. Sometimes you have to draw a line, not just with signs but with action. With creativity. With a touch of dirt under your nails cunning. And every now and then when I pass that section of my land, I see the faint dip where Kate's SUV met its muddy fate. Now overgrown, just a subtle scar in the earth, and I smile. Because some battles are worth fighting. Drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your stories, the HOA nightmares, the entitled neighbors, the wins, the losses, and the lessons you learned. Let's swap tales and compare scars. Sometimes the best way to deal with a charging bull is to build a really good fence. Maybe with a few surprises, just on your side of it.